June 6, 1944, 06:30 hours, Utah Beach, Normandy. The English Channel churned with steel and purpose as hundreds of landing craft approached the French coast through the grey dawn light. Machine gun fire cracked like deadly typewriters across the beach, while artillery shells screamed overhead and exploded in geysers of sand, smoke, and twisted metal. The first wave of American soldiers, faces blackened with camouflage paint and eyes wide with the knowledge that many would not see another sunset, prepared to storm Hitler's Atlantic Wall. And stepping into that chaos was a figure that made German observers in their concrete bunkers rub their eyes in disbelief, a 56-year-old American general, his body racked with arthritis, gripping a walking cane in one hand and his service pistol in the other. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., a son of the 26th President of the United States, had fought his own high command to earn the right to lead this assault. Army doctors had declared him unfit for frontline duty. His superiors had questioned his ability to keep pace with younger soldiers. His arthritis was so severe that he could barely walk without assistance, and his heart condition was known to every medical officer in the European theatre. Yet here he stood, in the surf of Normandy, water splashing around his boots, cane planted firmly in the sand, watching his 4th Infantry Division soldiers struggle ashore under withering German fire. His presence defied every rule of modern warfare, every principle of command safety, and every assumption about what a World War II general should look like in combat. The German defenders, peering through the smoke and chaos from their fortified positions, could hardly believe what they were seeing. Through binoculars and periscopes, they observed an elderly American officer walking calmly through machine gun fire, seemingly oblivious to the bullets whining past his head and the artillery shells exploding around his feet. Their intelligence reports had described American generals as soft rear echelon commanders who directed battles from comfortable headquarters miles behind the front lines. Instead, they watched this grey-haired veteran moving methodically along the beach, stopping to give orders to scattered soldiers, pointing inland with his cane as if he were conducting a training exercise rather than leading an assault against the most fortified coastline in Europe. Some German machine gunners hesitated to fire, wondering if this could possibly be a legitimate military target or some kind of Allied deception designed to confuse their defensive response. The 4th Infantry Division had landed in the wrong sector, scattered across unfamiliar terrain that bore no resemblance to the maps they had studied for months. Confusion spread through the assault waves as unit commanders realized they were not where they were supposed to be, facing obstacles they had not planned for, advancing toward objectives that did not exist in their designated locations. Panic began to ripple through the ranks as soldiers looked for familiar landmarks and found only chaos. It was at this critical moment, when the entire Utah Beach assault threatened to dissolve into catastrophic failure, that Roosevelt stepped forward with the calm authority of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for exactly this type of crisis. But could an aging veteran truly lead America's sons to victory on D-Day? Theodore Roosevelt, Jr. had lived his entire life in the shadow of his father's towering political legacy, but he had forged his own path through business, exploration, and military service that established him as a leader in his own right. Born into privilege and political prominence, he had rejected the comfortable life of wealth and social status to pursue adventures that took him across the globe as an explorer, big game hunter, and business executive. His military service began during World War I, where he served with distinction in the American Expeditionary Force, earning the respect of professional soldiers who initially viewed him with skepticism because of his famous family name. Between the wars, he had travelled extensively, written several books about his adventures, and established himself as a serious student of military affairs who understood both the theoretical and practical aspects of modern warfare. When America entered World War II, Roosevelt was approaching 60 and suffering from health problems that should have disqualified him from military service. His arthritis was so severe that he needed a walking cane to move comfortably, while his heart condition required constant medical monitoring and restricted physical activity. Army medical boards repeatedly recommended that he be assigned to staff positions where his experience could be valuable without exposing him to the physical demands of combat command. Roosevelt fought these recommendations with the same determination he had shown in civilian life, arguing that his experience and leadership abilities were more important than his physical limitations. He understood that modern warfare required commanders who could inspire soldiers through personal example, rather than simply issuing orders from comfortable headquarters. The strategic importance of Utah Beach in the overall Normandy invasion plan made Roosevelt's insistence on frontline command particularly significant for the success of Operation Overlord. Utah Beach represented the westernmost landing zone in the Allied assault, tasked with securing the vital Cotentin Peninsula and providing access to the deep water port of Cherbourg that would be essential for sustaining Allied operations in France. The 4th Infantry Division, which Roosevelt served as Assistant Division Commander, was responsible for establishing the beachhead that would allow follow-on forces to advance inland and link up with airborne divisions that had been dropped behind enemy lines during the night. Failure at Utah Beach could compromise the entire western flank of the invasion and potentially doom the Allied attempt to establish a permanent foothold in occupied Europe. German defensive preparations at Utah Beach reflected the Wehrmacht's understanding of the strategic importance of preventing Allied forces from gaining control of the Cotentin Peninsula and its vital port facilities. The Atlantic Wall in this sector consisted of concrete bunkers, anti-tank obstacles, minefields, and interlocking fields of fire designed to destroy attacking forces before they could establish a foothold on French soil. German commanders had positioned their best available troops in positions where they could bring concentrated firepower to bear on Allied landing craft and assault forces, while mobile reserves were positioned to counterattack any penetrations of the coastal defenses. Intelligence reports indicated that German morale was high and their defensive preparations were extensive, creating conditions where Allied success would depend on superior leadership, coordination, and individual courage under fire. The medical concerns surrounding Roosevelt's fitness for combat command reflected broader issues about age, physical capability, and leadership in modern warfare that challenged traditional military assumptions about the relationship between physical strength and command effectiveness. Military doctrine emphasized the importance of commanders who could maintain pace with their troops, endure the physical demands of extended combat operations, and provide personal examples of courage and determination under fire. Roosevelt's age and health problems seemed to disqualify him from meeting these requirements, leading many professional officers to question whether his presence would help or hinder the 4th Infantry Division's combat effectiveness. However, Roosevelt's supporters argued that his extensive military experience, proven leadership abilities, and personal courage more than compensated for his physical limitations. The planning process for the Utah Beach assault involved extensive intelligence gathering, tactical coordination, and logistical preparation that made the landing one of the most complex military operations in history. Allied planners had studied every aspect of the German defensive positions, beach conditions, tidal patterns, and inland terrain that would affect the success of the assault. Detailed maps, Aerial photographs and intelligence reports provided assault forces with comprehensive information about enemy positions and defensive capabilities, while specialized equipment and tactics were developed to overcome specific obstacles that would be encountered during the landing. The complexity of these preparations meant that any significant deviation from the planned approach could create confusion and chaos that might doom the entire operation. Roosevelt's role as Assistant Division Commander placed him in a unique position to influence the success of the Utah Beach operation through his understanding of both tactical and strategic considerations that would determine the outcome of the assault. Unlike younger officers who focused primarily on immediate tactical objectives, Roosevelt brought a broader perspective that encompassed the political, logistical, and long-term strategic implications of the Normandy invasion. His business experience had taught him to make rapid decisions under pressure, while his military service had provided him with practical knowledge of how soldiers behaved under combat conditions. Most importantly, his age and experience gave him a calm authority that could potentially stabilize chaotic situations where younger commanders might become overwhelmed by the pace and complexity of combat operations. The 4th Infantry Division represented one of America's most experienced and well-trained formations, with soldiers who had proven themselves in previous combat operations and officers who understood the demands of amphibious warfare. The division had undergone extensive specialized training for the Normandy invasion, practicing beach assault techniques, coordinating with naval and air support, and learning to operate the specialized equipment that would be essential for success against German defensive positions. However, even the best training could not fully prepare soldiers for the chaos and confusion of actual combat, particularly when unexpected circumstances disrupted carefully rehearsed plans and forced improvisation under fire. The broader context of D-Day operations meant that success at Utah Beach was essential not only for the immediate tactical situation, but also for the long-term strategic objectives of the Allied campaign in Europe. The Normandy invasion represented the culmination of years of planning, preparation, and resource allocation that had consumed enormous portions of Allied industrial capacity and military strength. Failure to establish a permanent foothold in France would not only result in massive casualties, but would also undermine Allied credibility, provide Germany with propaganda victories, and potentially delay the end of the war by months or years. The pressure on individual commanders like Roosevelt was enormous, as they understood that their personal decisions and actions could influence the fate of millions of people and the outcome of the war itself. The German intelligence assessment of American command capabilities had led enemy planners to assume that Allied generals would follow conventional military doctrine by directing operations from secure command posts located well behind the front lines. This assumption influenced German defensive planning, as they focused their efforts on disrupting Allied command and control systems rather than targeting individual commanders who were expected to remain out of direct fire range. Roosevelt's decision to lead from the front represented a fundamental deviation from expected American behavior that could potentially confuse German defensive responses and create tactical advantages for Allied forces who were prepared to exploit unexpected opportunities created by unconventional leadership approaches. The landing craft carrying the first wave of the 4th Infantry Division ground against the sand of Utah Beach at precisely 0630 hours, their steel ramps dropping with metallic crashes that were immediately drowned out by the thunder of German machine guns and artillery pieces that had been waiting for this moment since before dawn. Roosevelt stood in the bow of his landing craft, his cane gripped firmly in his left hand and his .45 caliber service pistol in his right, watching the chaos unfold across the beach with the calm detachment of a man who had spent 60 years preparing for this single moment of truth. Water sloshed around his boots as he stepped onto French soil for the first time, immediately sinking ankle-deep into sand that was already stained with blood and littered with equipment from the soldiers who had landed moments before. The immediate tactical situation was catastrophic in ways that no amount of planning could have anticipated. The 4th Infantry Division had landed nearly 2 miles south of their designated sector, scattered across unfamiliar terrain that bore no resemblance to the carefully studied maps and aerial photographs that had guided months of preparation. Unit commanders frantically searched for landmarks that did not exist in their current location, while soldiers looked for assembly points that were nowhere to be found. Radio communications crackled with confused reports from squad leaders who could not identify their positions, platoon sergeants who had lost contact with their companies, and company commanders who were trying to reorganize scattered formations under intense German fire. Roosevelt surveyed the chaos with eyes that had seen similar confusion during World War I, and recognized the critical decision point that would determine whether the Utah beach assault succeeded or failed catastrophically. Unlike younger officers who might have attempted to relocate their forces to the originally planned sector, Roosevelt understood that the landing had created its own tactical opportunities that could be exploited if American forces acted decisively rather than trying to correct their navigational error. Standing in the surf with German machine gun bullets whining overhead and artillery shells exploding around him, he made the command decision that would define his legacy and potentially alter the course of World War II. His words, delivered in the calm tone of a man discussing business arrangements rather than life-and-death military operations, cut through the noise and confusion like a sword through silk. "We'll start the war right here." The phrase, instantly transmitted through radio networks and repeated by soldiers throughout the beachhead, transformed catastrophic confusion into purposeful action by providing a clear, simple directive that every soldier could understand and execute. Roosevelt's decision eliminated the tactical paralysis that had threatened to doom the landing by giving scattered units an immediate objective: advance inland from their current positions rather than trying to reach their originally assigned locations. The psychological impact of Roosevelt's presence on the beach was immediate and profound, as soldiers who had been struggling with fear, confusion, and the natural human tendency to seek cover under fire saw their commanding general walking calmly through machine gun fire with nothing more than a walking cane for protection. His arthritis made each step painful, but he moved along the waterline with deliberate purpose, stopping to give orders to scattered squads, pointing inland with his cane to indicate advance routes, and demonstrating through personal example that German defensive fire could be overcome through courage and determination. Young soldiers who had never seen combat found their confidence restored by the sight of this grey-haired veteran, treating enemy fire as a minor inconvenience rather than a mortal threat. German observers in their concrete bunkers watched this unprecedented display with growing amazement and confusion that gradually transformed into tactical uncertainty about how to respond to a target that seemed to ignore their most concentrated defensive fires. Machine gun crews, who had been trained to engage groups of attacking soldiers, found themselves focusing on a single elderly officer who presented an impossible target, too important to ignore but too small and mobile to hit consistently with weapons designed for area suppression. Some German commanders began questioning whether this could be a genuine American general or some kind of elaborate deception designed to distract their defensive efforts from more dangerous threats advancing elsewhere on the beach. Roosevelt's tactical genius became apparent as he began reorganizing the scattered landing forces into coherent assault formations that could exploit the unexpected tactical situation created by their navigational error. Instead of viewing the wrong landing site as a disaster, he recognized that American forces had inadvertently achieved tactical surprise against German positions that had not expected to face assault from their current direction. The enemy defensive fires were concentrated in sectors where Allied forces were supposed to land, leaving gaps in coverage that could be exploited by soldiers advancing from unexpected directions under competent leadership that could coordinate their movements effectively. The walking cane that had symbolized Roosevelt's physical limitations became an instrument of tactical command as he used it to point out enemy positions, indicate advance routes, and signal to scattered soldiers who needed guidance in the chaos of combat. German snipers who attempted to target him found that his slow, deliberate movements made him a difficult target to track through telescopic sights, while his apparent disregard for enemy fire made it psychologically difficult for enemy soldiers to concentrate on precise shooting. The sight of an American general advancing through their defensive fires with nothing more than a walking stick for protection began to undermine German confidence in their ability to stop the Allied assault. Within 30 minutes of landing, Roosevelt had transformed the chaotic Utah Beach situation into a coordinated advance that was achieving objectives faster than originally planned, despite the navigational error that had initially threatened disaster. His calm authority and clear decision-making had provided scattered units with the leadership they needed to overcome their initial confusion and begin advancing inland against German positions that were not prepared to face attack from their current direction. The success was being achieved not through superior firepower or numerical advantage, but through the type of inspired leadership that could only be provided by a commander who was willing to share the dangers faced by his soldiers. The German defensive response began to break down as Roosevelt's reorganized assault forces advanced beyond the effective range of pre-registered artillery fires and into areas where German defensive positions had not been optimally sited to resist attack. Enemy machine gun nests that had been positioned to create interlocking fields of fire across the designated landing zones found themselves flanked by American soldiers advancing from directions that had not been anticipated during defensive planning. The tactical surprise achieved through navigational error combined with Roosevelt's leadership was creating opportunities for success that had not existed in the original assault plan. Radio communications from Utah Beach began reporting unprecedented success as Roosevelt's improvised tactics achieved breakthrough after breakthrough against German positions that had expected to hold their ground for hours or days. The assistant division commander, who had been considered too old and infirm for combat command, was leading the most successful amphibious assault of D-Day, proving that experience, courage, and tactical intuition could be more valuable than youth and physical strength in the crucible of combat. His walking cane had become the symbol of American determination to succeed regardless of obstacles or opposition. The sight of Roosevelt advancing inland, still carrying his cane and still directing tactical operations under fire, inspired American soldiers throughout the beachhead to push forward with confidence that their mission would succeed, despite the chaos and confusion that had initially threatened disaster. His example demonstrated that leadership in combat was not about physical capability, but about moral courage, tactical intelligence, and the ability to make critical decisions under pressure. The young soldiers following him into battle were witnessing a masterclass in combat leadership that would influence their understanding of courage and duty for the rest of their lives. By noon, The Utah Beach sector, that had initially seemed doomed by navigational error, had become the most successful landing zone of the entire D-Day operation, with American forces advancing inland faster and with fewer casualties than had been achieved at any other beach. Roosevelt's decision to start the war right here had transformed tactical disaster into strategic success through the type of inspired improvisation that could only be achieved by commanders who possessed the experience, confidence, and moral authority to make critical decisions under the most extreme pressure imaginable. German radio communications intercepted by Allied intelligence services revealed the profound psychological impact Roosevelt's leadership was having on enemy morale and tactical confidence. Enemy commanders were reporting that American forces at Utah Beach were being led by officers who seemed immune to defensive fires and capable of achieving impossible tactical objectives through sheer determination and superior leadership. The elderly American general with the walking cane had become a symbol of Allied determination that was undermining German confidence in their ability to prevent the establishment of a permanent Allied foothold in France. The medical staff assigned to monitor Roosevelt's condition during the assault reported that the intense physical and emotional demands of combat leadership seemed to be having a paradoxical effect on his health, as the adrenaline and sense of purpose provided by leading soldiers in battle appeared to overcome the limitations imposed by his arthritis and heart condition. For several hours on June 6, 1944, Theodore Roosevelt Jr. became the soldier he had always wanted to be, leading from the front and proving that courage and experience could triumph over any physical limitation when the stakes were high enough to demand the best from every individual involved in the struggle. The psychological transformation of American forces at Utah Beach following Roosevelt's inspirational leadership created ripple effects that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation, as word of the elderly general's heroic actions spread through Allied communications networks and reached soldiers throughout the Normandy beachhead within hours of the initial landing. Radio operators transmitted accounts of Roosevelt walking through machine gun fire with his cane, while wounded soldiers being evacuated to aid stations shared stories of seeing their commanding general advance inland under fire without regard for his personal safety. These accounts created a powerful narrative about American leadership and determination that helped sustain morale during the critical first days when the success of the entire invasion remained uncertain. The strategic implications of Utah Beach's unexpected success became apparent within 24 hours, as the rapid inland advance achieved by Roosevelt's improvised tactics created opportunities for linking up with airborne forces and securing key terrain that had been designated as D+3 objectives in the original operational plan. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, who had been scattered by their nighttime drops behind enemy lines, found themselves being relieved by advancing infantry forces days ahead of schedule, because Roosevelt's leadership had accelerated the timetable for establishing secure communications between beach and airborne forces. This tactical success provided the foundation for subsequent operations that would secure the Cotentin Peninsula and capture the vital port of Cherbourg weeks ahead of the original schedule. German intelligence assessments of the Utah Beach disaster revealed the profound impact that Roosevelt's personal leadership had on enemy planning and morale throughout the Normandy sector. Intercepted communications indicated that German commanders were struggling to understand how American forces had achieved such rapid success despite landing in the wrong location, with some enemy officers attributing the results to superior American intelligence, others to tactical deception, and still others to the type of inspired leadership that German doctrine insisted was impossible in democratic armies. The failure to contain the Utah Beach breakthrough forced German High Command to commit mobile reserves that had been intended for counterattacks against other landing zones. The medical consequences of Roosevelt's exertions during D-Day became apparent in the following days, as the physical and emotional stress of leading combat operations began taking a toll on his already compromised health. Military doctors noted that his heart condition had worsened significantly, while his arthritis pain had increased to levels that would normally require immediate medical evacuation. However, Roosevelt refused all suggestions that he be removed from combat duty, arguing that his soldiers needed his leadership and that he had not come to France to be treated as an invalid. His determination to continue serving, despite obvious physical deterioration, created both inspiration and concern among medical personnel who understood the risks he was taking. The propaganda value of Roosevelt's D-Day heroics was immediately recognized by Allied public relations officers who saw opportunities to use his story to demonstrate American leadership qualities and counter German claims about democratic military ineffectiveness. News correspondents were given access to soldiers who had witnessed Roosevelt's actions, while photographers documented the elderly general continuing his duties despite obvious physical limitations. The resulting stories and images provided powerful evidence of American determination and helped maintain home front morale during a period when casualty reports from Normandy were creating anxiety about the costs of the European campaign. Intelligence reports from German sources revealed that Roosevelt's actions had achieved significant psychological warfare effects beyond their immediate tactical impact, as enemy soldiers and officers struggled to understand how American forces could be led by officers who seemed willing to sacrifice themselves for their subordinates. German military culture emphasized hierarchical authority and personal survival of command personnel, making it difficult for enemy forces to comprehend leadership styles that prioritized soldier welfare over officer safety. This cultural confusion contributed to broader German difficulties in predicting and countering American tactical approaches throughout the Normandy campaign. The leadership lessons demonstrated by Roosevelt's D-Day performance began influencing American military doctrine and training programs within weeks of the invasion, as reports of his actions reached military schools and training centers throughout the United States. Officer candidate schools incorporated case studies of Roosevelt's improvised tactics and inspirational leadership into their curricula, while senior commanders throughout the European theater began emphasizing the importance of leading from the front and making critical decisions under pressure. The elderly general's example became a standard for measuring combat leadership that would influence American military culture for generations. The human cost of Roosevelt's leadership style became tragically apparent on July 12, 1944, when he suffered a fatal heart attack in his headquarters tent in France, just 36 days after his heroic performance at Utah Beach. Military doctors attributed his death directly to the physical and emotional stress of leading combat operations despite his age and health conditions, making him a casualty of his own determination to serve regardless of personal risk. His death created profound sadness throughout American forces in Europe, who had come to view him as a symbol of courage and dedication that embodied the best qualities of American leadership. The Medal of Honor recommendation, submitted for Roosevelt's D-Day actions, faced initial bureaucratic resistance from officers who questioned whether his performance met the technical requirements for America's highest military decoration. However, eyewitness accounts from soldiers throughout the 4th Infantry Division provided overwhelming evidence that his leadership had been instrumental in preventing tactical disaster and achieving unprecedented success against heavily defended enemy positions. The award, approved posthumously, recognized not only his individual courage, but also the broader principle that leadership in combat required personal example rather than just tactical competence. The long-term impact of Roosevelt's Utah Beach leadership extended far beyond immediate military results to influence post-war understanding of combat leadership and the relationship between personal courage and tactical effectiveness. Military historians analyzing the Normandy campaign identified his improvised decision-making and inspirational presence as crucial factors in Allied success, while leadership theorists used his example to demonstrate that experience and moral authority could be more valuable than physical capability in extreme situations. His legacy became part of the broader narrative about how individual actions could influence the course of major historical events. The German perspective on Roosevelt's actions, revealed through post-war interrogations and captured documents, provided insights into how enemy forces viewed American leadership and the psychological impact of witnessing behavior that contradicted their assumptions about democratic military culture. Many German officers expressed grudging respect for Roosevelt's courage, while admitting that his example had undermined their confidence in their ability to predict and counter American tactical approaches. The elderly general with the cane had challenged fundamental German assumptions about American character and military effectiveness, contributing to broader enemy demoralization throughout the Normandy campaign. The tactical success achieved at Utah Beach under Roosevelt's leadership demonstrated the continuing importance of individual leadership and human judgment in an era increasingly dominated by technological solutions to military problems, proving that advanced weapons, sophisticated planning, and industrial superiority could not guarantee victory without competent officers capable of making critical decisions under extreme pressure. While D-Day represented the culmination of Allied technological advantages in amphibious warfare equipment, naval gunfire support, and air superiority, the crucial breakthrough at Utah Beach was achieved through improvised tactics and inspirational leadership rather than superior firepower or equipment. This lesson reinforced the enduring importance of human factors in military operations despite the increasing mechanization of modern warfare. The strategic significance of Utah Beach within the broader Normandy invasion plan reflected careful Allied analysis of German defensive capabilities and the requirements for establishing a sustainable foothold in occupied Europe. The westernmost landing zone was essential for securing the Cotentin Peninsula and providing access to Cherbourg's deep-water port facilities that would be required for sustaining major Allied operations in France. However, the complex logistics of amphibious warfare meant that initial tactical success was only the first step in a much larger strategic operation that required continuous reinforcement, supply and expansion of the beachhead against inevitable German counterattacks designed to drive Allied forces back into the sea. The comparative analysis of leadership effectiveness at different Normandy landing zones revealed significant correlations between the presence of experienced senior officers and the speed of tactical success achieved during the critical first hours of the invasion. Utah Beach, where Roosevelt's leadership prevented disaster and achieved rapid inland advance, contrasted sharply with situations at other beaches where younger commanders struggled with unexpected tactical developments and failed to exploit opportunities for breakthrough. These results reinforced military doctrine, emphasizing the importance of placing experienced leaders in positions where their judgment would be most crucial during critical operations. The technological infrastructure supporting Allied amphibious operations at Normandy represented unprecedented coordination between naval, air, and ground forces that required months of planning and specialized equipment development to achieve effective integration of different military capabilities. Landing craft Amphibious vehicles, portable radio communications, naval gunfire control systems, and air-ground coordination procedures all had to function perfectly during the chaos of combat operations to provide assault forces with the support they needed to overcome German defensive advantages. The success of these technological systems provided the foundation that allowed leaders like Roosevelt to achieve tactical breakthroughs through superior decision-making and inspiration. The German defensive strategy for the Atlantic Wall reflected their understanding that preventing Allied forces from establishing a permanent foothold in France was essential for avoiding a two-front war that would stretch Wehrmacht capabilities beyond their breaking point. Massive concrete fortifications, extensive minefields, underwater obstacles, and concentrated firepower were designed to destroy Allied assault forces during their most vulnerable phase, the transition from ship to shore, when they lacked heavy weapons and secure communications. However, this defensive approach assumed that Allied commanders would follow predictable tactical doctrine rather than improvising solutions to unexpected problems through inspired leadership and tactical flexibility. The logistics revolution represented by Allied supply operations in the European theatre demonstrated how industrial capacity and organizational efficiency could be translated into sustained military capability across thousands of miles of ocean and hostile territory. The ability to transport, supply, and maintain millions of soldiers and their equipment required unprecedented coordination between military and civilian organizations, while new technologies for cargo handling, transportation, and distribution made possible operations that would have been impossible during earlier conflicts. Roosevelt's success at Utah Beach was enabled by this logistical foundation, which ensured that his forces had the weapons, ammunition, and supplies necessary to exploit their tactical advantages. The intelligence preparation supporting D-Day operations involved months of reconnaissance, code-breaking, and analysis that provided Allied planners with detailed knowledge of German defensive positions, troop dispositions, and tactical capabilities throughout the Normandy region. Aerial photography, intercepted communications, resistance reports, and prisoner interrogations created comprehensive intelligence pictures that allowed Allied forces to plan specific tactics for overcoming known enemy positions. However, this intelligence could only be effective when combined with leadership capable of adapting plans to unexpected circumstances, as Roosevelt demonstrated when he improvised solutions to problems that had not been anticipated during the planning process. The Medal of Honor, awarded posthumously to Roosevelt, represented recognition not only of his individual courage, but also of broader principles about combat leadership that the award was designed to encourage throughout American military culture. The citation emphasized his willingness to share danger with his soldiers, his tactical competence under extreme pressure, and his ability to inspire subordinates to achieve objectives that seemed impossible under the circumstances. These qualities were considered essential for American military effectiveness and worthy of the highest recognition regardless of the specific technological or strategic context in which they were demonstrated. The post-war analysis of Normandy operations provided valuable lessons for subsequent amphibious operations during the Pacific Campaign and influenced American military doctrine for decades after World War II ended. Roosevelt's example became part of broader understanding about the relationship between individual leadership and operational success, while his tactical improvisation at Utah Beach was studied as an example of how experienced commanders could exploit unexpected opportunities through rapid decision-making and effective communication with subordinate units. These lessons remained relevant as American forces faced similar challenges in Korea, Vietnam, and subsequent conflicts where technological superiority had to be combined with effective leadership to achieve strategic objectives. The profound irony of D-Day's most unlikely hero lay in the reality that Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the aging general dismissed by army doctors as unfit for combat duty, became the embodiment of everything Allied propaganda claimed about American leadership, while simultaneously disproving German assumptions about democratic military weakness. In a campaign characterized by massive technological preparations, sophisticated planning, and industrial superiority, the decisive moment at Utah Beach was determined by a 56-year-old man with a walking cane who refused to accept the limitations imposed by age, infirmity, or conventional military wisdom. The contrast was both inspiring and humbling. While engineers designed specialized landing craft and strategists coordinated the movements of millions of soldiers, victory ultimately depended on one elderly officer's willingness to risk everything for the men under his command. The human dimensions of Roosevelt's heroism transcended the immediate tactical situation to reveal fundamental truths about courage, duty, and the relationship between personal character and historical significance. His decision to lead from the front, despite obvious physical limitations, represented a conscious choice to embody the values he had spent his entire life defending, even when that choice might cost him his life. The young soldiers who followed him across the beaches of Normandy witnessed more than military leadership. They saw a demonstration of how individual conscience and personal courage could triumph over any obstacle when the stakes were high enough to demand the best from every participant in the struggle. The strategic implications of Roosevelt's leadership extended far beyond the success of a single amphibious assault to influence the entire trajectory of Allied operations in Europe and the ultimate outcome of World War II. His improvised tactics at Utah Beach prevented what could have been a catastrophic failure that might have doomed the Normandy invasion and delayed Allied victory by months or years. More importantly, his example demonstrated that democratic armies could produce leaders capable of matching or exceeding the performance of their totalitarian opponents through superior moral character rather than ideological indoctrination or political fanaticism. The legacy of Theodore Roosevelt Jr. as final battlefield command continues to resonate through American military culture as a reminder that true leadership in combat cannot be reduced to technical competence, physical capability, or bureaucratic authority, but must ultimately rest on the moral courage to make difficult decisions under extreme pressure while accepting personal responsibility for the consequences. His walking cane became a symbol not of weakness or limitation, but of determination to serve regardless of personal cost, proving that sometimes history's greatest victories are achieved not through youth and strength, but through experience, wisdom, and the unwavering commitment to duty that defines genuine heroism in any era. If you want more untold stories of World War II, subscribe now to WW2 Secret Archives, where history's darkest secrets are revealed.